Is it like being part of the Mafia? I am a reformed criminal. I can't excuse my old life, but in many ways I feel I have made amends. I joined the US military later than most people. I was 26 at the time. I was never charged or arrested for my crimes because I decided to get out while I still could. After I joined the military, I did 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. I feel like between God and we are square. I grew up dirt poor in Los Angeles. As a kid I was heavily involved in martial arts, and by the time I was 20 I was doing amateur mixed martial arts and cage fighting. I held 2 black belts. 1 in Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was also over 6 feet tall and over 200 pounds of muscle. A lot of Asian guys came to the underground fights and they made money betting on me. They would buy me drinks and ask me to hang out with them. They were members of the Asian Boys gang, which at the time in LA was the last gang you wanted to mess with. Eventually, one of them brought a Russian friend of his and offered me a job as a bouncer in a Russian-owned nightclub in LA called Spunday on Santa Monica Boulevard. It was rave-style trance music full of all walks of life. Even had gay Igors, which were the worst because they fought more than anyone else. It didn't take me long to figure out that the Russian dudes who ran the place were Russian Mafia. They had some sort of partnership with the Asian boys who handled their muscle and ran the ecstasy trade. I ended up trying ecstasy and loved it. Within a few months I was dealing with it. Soon the Asian boys came to me and explained that I was dealing on their turf. It wasn't an argument or anything. They were actually really respectful but told me that they can't tolerate me dealing in the club. They insisted it was their market. Then I made a stupid decision. I said, look, I kick your guys out all the time for dealing here. And the cops come in a lot. How about you sell to me and I'll push it for you in the club? I can move more than your guys, plus I know when the cops are around. They actually liked the idea, and I think that's what they had in mind. I was Irish, so there was no way they were going to recruit me into the Asian boys. But they treated me like one of their own. I went to all of their house parties, they provided me with an endless stream of Asian girls, and we would roll on ecstasy all night. Before long I was earning about $2,000 a week after kicking money upstairs to them and eventually the Russians. I saw people get busted before, so I was never flashy with my money. I drove an old 80s Toyota and stayed in my little apartment. I didn't want any attention, and both the Asian boys and the Russians loved that. As a bouncer, I had to get violent with a lot of people. And that slowly turned into getting violent with people who I comped and owed me money. And same went for my competition. I was confronted by a Latino gang member who had a problem with me for no reason. He made threats to me and put a lot of crap out on the street about me. The Russians and the Asian boys sat me down and basically said, look, you have to handle this. If he is talking about our operation here, which now extended to 4 nightclubs, then that's what attracted a lot of attention. We already knew there was a gang task force on the Asian boys and that undercovers were coming into the club. I started using mules to do my deals so I could insulate myself. And they ended up doubling business. Finally, Latino gangster came to the club and got caught with a gun that he was trying to get into the club. He went to jail that night, and while in the county, someone slit his throat. Not me or anyone I know had anything to do with it. But the Russians and the Asian boys thought I did. Sooner or later the Latino gangster was destined to talk shot to the wrong person. It was bound to happen. I let them think that I had it done because I didn't know what else to do. But I didn't say a word. That ended up gaining me a lot of credit, and a lot of business opportunities came my way. All illegal, of course. But in the minds of the Asian boys and the Russians, I was confirmed as one of them. I started up a parts carrying business that moved parts between factories during various stages of production. I was only 24 and making about $20,000 a month. One of the factories was of course owned by a Russian dude. He had a scam going to launder money through his joint by falsifying parts that never existed to justify money transfers. One day, I got sent for by the Russians. They wanted me to meet them at one of the clubs in the middle of the day, which was unusual. I was scared. But for the most part, I made money and I wasn't an idiot. So I knew they had no reason to harm me. When I got there was my main boss and 3 other guys I didn't know. They were all Italian. Not New York but Italy. They were members of 'Ndrangheta, the Italian Mafia in Europe. They were hooked up with a New York Mafia and wanted an ecstasy connection. They told me that their old source in Arizona had dried up. I always wondered if they were talking about Sammy Gravano, who was busted around that time for dealing ecstasy in Oz. But I never knew. I didn't want to become their source for 2 reasons. First, if their original source dried up, then that meant they had heat on them. Second, I was afraid I would be getting into something that I couldn't get out of. I told them to wait a few days while I set something up. Here I was, now a 25-year-old kid, sitting across from real mafioso in their 40s and 50s. I went to the Asian boys and asked them how much more ecstasy they could get me. I was dealing about 500 pills a week already. They told me they were maxed out and that it was getting harder to move. I knew it came from China and up through Mexico. I told them that if they can up it to 5,000 pills a week, I knew someone who could move it for them. They wanted proof, so they gave me 5,000 pills on loan. They had zero problem getting a hold of it seconds after they claimed they couldn't get it. I went back to the Italians and sold it to them for $50,000 that they could easily double their money on. I went back to the Asian boys and gave them $50,000. No profit for myself. They were ecstatic. They ended up showing me their whole operation that supplied several U.S. cities. Vegas, Salt Lake City, Louisiana, San Diego, Miami, etc. They never wanted to tell me how big they were before. But now that I moved that much for them, I was in like Flynn. I went back to the Italians and they said they could move those pills in New York in less than a week. They asked me for 40,000 pills. That was a huge stretch, I thought, so I told them I would have to see. I went back to the Asian boys and to my surprise they changed their tune. They were more aggressive than usual and it seemed like they were maybe a little jealous. I was always looking for an out because I knew that it was only a matter of time before I got fingered by a gang task force. I decided to make them an offer that I thought was a long shot. I told them that we had done good business for 3 years at that point and we partied a lot together. I told them that they were my friends and I didn't want anything to happen to them. I told them that I found out there was a detective who made me and one of my customers might testify to me. I made up a person and said she was one of my customers and after getting arrested she disappeared on me. It was a total lie. I said that she got out of jail and the next day her apartment was empty. Everyone agreed that it sounded like she went into protective custody. I told them that I didn't want to do business with them anymore because I was afraid all of us would get busted. But I told them that I would hook them up with my connection who wanted the 5K pills and that they wanted to move a lot more. They saw the logic in what I was saying. By removing myself as the middleman, they would be able to expand and drop whatever heat I had on me. Of course they told me that we were friends, but they reminded me that if I walked away after they let me and I ended up flipping, they would kill my family. There was an old man there who I heard was a member of the Chinese triad. But I never confirmed that. He got angry at them for giving me that threat and yelled at them in Chinese. A minute later, someone came back with a bottle of scotch and poured shots for everyone. Suddenly my hair started standing up on the back of my neck. I had a feeling they were going to kill me. But we drank and everything seemed fine. We all hugged. A few days later, myself, the Italians and the Asian boys sat down in a steakhouse and I introduced everyone. Everyone just talked about sports, politics, the news or whatever. No business. Just introductions. I knew to do this because it was the Omerta way. Italian La Cosa Nostra does it that way and it is considered off limits to discuss business over dinner. One guy whose name was, no crap, Furio, walked me outside to talk. I think he stole the name from The Sopranos. But I wasn't going to tell him that. He wanted to know if I was getting a piece of the deal or if the Asian boys were muscling it on me. I told him that I am not the type to be muscled. I said that I will go after families as quickly as they would. It was a line of bullcrap because I never killed anyone, at least not until the military, and I didn't intend to. But I knew I couldn't start crap by accusing the Asian boys of muscling me, and I couldn't come off like a pussy either. I told Furio that I worked for the Russians. They wanted me to find you a connection because they knew I could. But that's where our partnership ended. I said the Asian boys didn't have a beef with me and didn't want one with the Russians. He had me follow him out to his car so he could give me something. I was scared. He opened up his truck and I pictured myself getting thrown in. I turned my body as if expecting someone to come up behind me. Furio sees this and laughs. You watch too many movies, he said. I thought, you are the jerk named after a character on The Sopranos. He told me that if he wanted to do anything to me he would pay a couple of gangsters to do it for him because they fit in better in jail. Instead, he pulled out a velvet bag and handed it to me. That's for you for tonight. I walked out to my car without looking at it. I didn't want to look at it in front of him for some reason. He got in his car and drove off. I opened the bag in my car and saw it was a 2-pound gold bar. Worth about 15K at the time. Maybe 45K now. I still have it to this day. I had a nest egg of about 6 figures saved up and I left town for a suburb. I ended up getting a few jobs in security and was glad to be out of that life. I ran into one of the Asian boys about 6 months later who was coming out of a restaurant as I walked in. It was odd seeing him in the suburbs and I was suspicious. I was with a girl who was pretty hot and he checked her out. I told her to go inside and get us a table. The Asian boy just complimented me and we caught up for a minute. He laughed and asked, so did you change your name and crap? I was relieved because I knew that he figured I had gone on the run to avoid getting arrested. I told him that I was going by a different name and just laying low, doing legit work. I told him that I didn't know if I could get back in or not. He told me that I shouldn't. He shocked me when he said that no one can do it forever. He said he would get out, but he needed the money. We exchanged numbers and that was it. I never saw him again. About a year later, 2 things happened that changed my life. I saw on the news that LA conducted a huge substance bust and took down the Asian boys. I saw guys I knew being led in cuffs. I took it as it meant that I was officially out of that life forever. Which was my intention. I later found out that one of the mafioso was a DEA agent. It couldn't have been Furio because he gave me gold. A DEA agent would not have done that. It turned out that the Russian I worked for was pinched for something and agreed to give up the largest ecstasy ring in LA in exchange for immunity. The Russians are pretty wily like that. They won't give up on each other but will sell out a partner. I was fearful that my initial substance deal with them would mean they would come after me and arrest me next. They never did. I eventually figured that I was perceived as a courier rather than a dealer. The next thing that happened that changed my life was 9/11 that same year. I felt that I wanted to do something with meaning and leave criminal activity behind completely. I was pissed that the USA was attacked, so I joined the military. 18 years later, I'm out of the military, a combat veteran and own my own legit business. And I don't touch substances.